Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into an unexpected story. Fast forward to 1589, and it's like humans got a whole makeover, and Hobbs is clearly living it up. Dressed elegantly, his table was full of mouth-watering dishes, and his pride shone like his fancy suit. Knowing the guy wanted a good story, he launched into his last century turns out after their last goodbye. He was hustling hard for cash to land a gig at his shipyard. Not only did he snag some real estate, but he also donated the rest to the king, who hooked him up with a spectacular title. With that shiny title, he struck some lucrative deals, got a wife, had kids, and was living his best life. His dream of paradise looked just like this, when suddenly he caught wind of a play happening nearby. The play featured a young guy chasing his dreams, and the Sandman couldn't help but ask Hobbs, "Who's that dude? Is he impressive?" Hobbs shook his head. "The real talent's that guy with the broken leg. He's a famous playwright." Hobbs wanted to keep bragging about his century, but the Sandman waved him off. Then he marched right up to Shakespeare, realizing this guy was all about inspiring others through creativity. As the master of dreams himself, he was also a dreamer, so he took Shakespeare outside for a chat while Hobbs felt snubbed. Hobbs suddenly found the fancy feast a bit lackluster, muttering to himself, "Life's too short, gotta aim high." Before another century flew by. This time the Sandman was early at the tavern waiting for Hobbs, who barged in like a starving bear. Looks like the last century wasn't kind, otherwise he wouldn't be such a hot mess. He lamented to Sandman about losing everything. His house, gold, wife, and kids vanished like magic. He nearly drowned from being mistaken for a wizard. Those past 80 years felt like slurping on endless cold soup, utterly unbearable. But to the Sandman's surprise, Hobbs still wanted to keep living, convinced his misfortune was just a phase. Just then, some guy upstairs was painting their encounter, and voila, it's 1789, and they're back together again. Now Hobbs was back on top, in the shipping biz, hauling British cotton to Africa for some not-so-fun trades. Though the Sandman had promised Hobbs to live life his own way upon hearing news of his involvement in the slave trade, he couldn't help but advise him against continuing this sinister business. Hobbs shot back, "Is this a suggestion? After 400 years, you still want to dictate my life?" The Sandman coolly replied, "The choice is yours, but do you really want to keep robbing others of theirs?" Hobbs took the advice, and just then, a woman with 2 strong men appeared. She was Constantine's ancestor. She told them she got a painting from a vagrant, claiming this tavern was a hotspot for devils and wandering Jews meeting every century. "Y'all share both gifts and demise within the confines of this tavern this century." The Sandman retorted, "I'm not a devil," and Hobbs added, "I'm no Jew," but she clearly wasn't buying it, so she ordered her goons to hold them off. Before the Sandman could react, Hobbs wasn't about to give up easy. Hobbs made a move directly, but was swiftly subdued by her dagger in the end. Witnessing this, the Sandman blew some sand, instantly sending John Constantine into a nightmare. Hobbs, shocked, asked what the Sandman did, to which he replied, "Oh, just showing him some ghostly sights." Hobbs was dying to ask what kind of creature the Sandman was, but as the bond deepened, he got more hesitant. The Sandman cautioned him that others might learn their identities, to which Hobbs shrugged off, feeling invincible. The Sandman warned him, "Sure, you may not die, but others might just lock you up." They agreed to meet again in a century. Instantaneously, they jumped ahead to the 5th century. Oh, how time flies, and Hobbs seemed way more composed now. The Sandman keenly observed the change, yet Hobbs helplessly sighed, stating that despite having summed up countless lessons, he continued to stumble over the very same mistakes. Hobbs reckoned the real change was in the Sandman, who asked why he thought that. Hobbs felt had never entertained thoughts of death, and the Sandman surely understood this. Yeah, every century he still sought Hobbs out, which led Hobbs to think the Sandman was lonely and craving friendship. Hobbs shouted, "Even if you're furious, I must tell you, if you appear in the next century, it will sufficiently prove we're friends." Time flies, and before you know it, it's 1989, with London now in its after-hours phase. Hobbs strolled into the tavern, eager to meet the Sandman, but after 2 beers, he was still ghosting him. Waiting from day to night, Hobbs refused to give up, unaware the Sandman wasn't flaking out but locked up in a basement by a sorcerer. After a century of being imprisoned, the Sandman finally snagged a chance to escape, reclaiming his artifacts and becoming the one deserving punishment. But once all was done, the Sandman fell into despair, thinking reclaiming his artifacts would bring happiness, yet he felt worse than ever. After listening, his sister commented, stating that she believed him to be the dumbest, extremely self-centered, and incredibly tragic being on the planet. All because of the end of a little game, and he lacked the guts to seek out a new one. He was even worse than the god of desire. Death grabbed the Sandman, dragging him to see how people spent their days. First stop, an old man's house. The old man, despite some reluctance, followed death, and sibling duo strolled to the riverbank,